Welcome to Strictly Speaking. My name is Joshua Reaves. I'm the director of University Theater at NC State, and I just want to welcome everyone back to our final Strictly Speaking for this semester. Tonight, we have a special guest with us right down the street, right here in Raleigh, Eric Woodall, the producing artistic director for the North Carolina Theater. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, without further ado, let's start off with the first question we ask. Eric, what does it mean to be a producing artistic director?
Well, an artistic director is the person at a theater, usually a regional theater around the country, um, who oversees all things artistic. The producing part of the title is added often when that position oversees not only all things artistic but all things production wise. Um, it's common that an artistic director oversees many things production wise, but it when it encompasses all elements of the production, then the title is producing artistic director. So that is the role that I play here at North Carolina Theater. There is an executive director. It's an interesting fact that at regional theaters, it's different around the country. Sometimes the artistic director job is the top job of the theater company. Sometimes the executive director job is the top position at the company. Sometimes they share equal billing.
Mhm.
At North Carolina Theater, the executive director position, which at NCT is called CEO and president, that position rides above the producing artistic director. So the board hired the CEO and president, and then that person, who's Elizabeth Doran here at North Carolina Theater, was the person who brought me on. So so there is a pecking order there, but as far as all things artistic, I really do look after all of those things. I have final say in a lot of the artistic matters and oversee all things of the production.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that, because you're right. It is very different, and a lot of our guests that are producing artistic directors, they've given different stories. So your story matches up, Eric. So that's great. Well, and you haven't always been a producing artistic director. You have worn so many hats in the world of theater. And before we hit each one of those, I'd love to hear, how did you get your start in this career in this theater world?
Yes, yes. Well, I am from, this has been a homecoming for me. I've been in this position now for 2 years, and I moved to North Carolina to take the job. I've been in New York City for really my whole adult life, over 25 years. But I'm from this area originally. I'm from a small town outside of Raleigh called Benson, and growing up there, I was interested in theater at a very early age, and so I started doing theater in this area as an actor, and actually worked at North Carolina Theater when I was in high school. I was in some of the musicals that NCT produced, um, and worked with a lot of theaters in this area. And then I went to college. I was fortunate to get into Carnegie Mellon University, and so I studied drama there and graduated with a degree in drama as an actor. And I was a professional actor for over 10 years, doing national tours, Broadway, moved out to LA, did film and TV. Um, and then I was segueing into directing. I've always been interested in all elements of theater, and I was directing, and I got a great opportunity, which was to get into casting. And so it makes it sound very easy, but I did. I segued into casting, and so um, that's kind of. I mean, I know we're going to talk about those different elements a little bit later, but that's how I got my start. I was bitten by the theater bug at a very early age, and and so I started doing it in this area. And then I spent a summer at Governor's School. That wasn't in drama; it was in choral music.
Mhm.
And I also, for folks that are familiar with things in the state here. And then I also spent a summer going to North Carolina School of the Arts, University of North Carolina School of the Arts now. And that summer really changed my life because there was an instructor there who was able to explain, this is what you need to do, you want to do if you want to be an actor. And I'd never heard of the different schools that were in the League of Professional Training Programs. I'd never heard of, going to New York and being in showcases so agents and casting directors could see you. And so I suddenly I was like, this little boy from Johnston County was like, that's what I want. That's what I want. And so I wrote off to these different schools, and that began the journey.
Awesome. And having hit all of these different things, different hats that you've worn, do you miss the acting? Do you miss the directing? Are you still active in that?
Yes. The directing is still very active, because I'm able to um, direct in with this job as producing artistic director, and it's actually in my contract to direct at least one a season. But like my inaugural season, well, I ended up doing three. It wasn't in the same season, but I did three in the same fiscal year. And I love that. In some ways it's too much, but I love that I get to continue to direct. The directing is what got me back kind of on this avenue, because I was a casting director in New York
Mhm.
doing Broadway shows, and I was missing the directing element.
Yeah.
I was missing that creative outlet. The acting, who knows? Maybe one day I'll come back to it. The thing is, I do love it. I feel like an actor first and foremost. I really do. Even in my directing, I feel like an actor first. But I used to have that life in me, the that what it takes to pursue that. I used to have that, but I know that I don't have that today. I don't have that drive in that way, of what it takes to be an actor. So I miss being in rehearsal. I miss being in a great production. I miss all of that. Gosh, um, but not what else goes with it that I
Gotcha.
know that it takes.
Gotcha. Well, let's hit the casting directing thing. I think it's the
Sure.
one thing that, personally I know little about, but also we haven't interviewed anyone with a casting directing background. So
hmm
tell us everything there is to know about casting directing.
Well, it's fascinating. When I got the opportunity, so when I was still an actor and directing some in between jobs, I would be I would I had some friends in casting in New York, and I was asked to be a reader. And what that meant is that I was able to sit in on auditions, and I was there with a chair off to the side. And everybody who came into audition, I read the scenes with them, and I would act the scenes with them. It was fantastic experience. It's the most incredible education. Like, you can't pay for that kind of education, to be inside of the room, to see what people do, how prepared people are when people aren't prepared, what things really do matter, what things don't matter that we freak out about when we're actors. Um, and listening to the conversation behind the table with directors and with the casting directors, I learned so much. And I was able to apply that to a lot of my acting, but it did plant the seed. I thought,
Mhm.
I like that. I didn't think seriously about it at the time, but I thought, I like that. And then cut 2 years later, there was an opportunity to leap. Tara Rubin, who I ended up working with, and opened her own office. That's one of the most successful casting offices in New York City. Um, she was going out on her own from the office that she had been with for many, many years, and she was growing so quickly. And I was at a place in my life that I was looking for a real change, and so I was able to join her company, and become a casting associate right away, which is normally not the way. But because of the body of work that I had under my belt, I was able to do that. Casting is so interesting. I prepared myself that it was going to be all administrative, and I thought I had sold my soul, and I had failed, and I was no longer going to be creative, and I I turned into one of them, and I was going to the other side of the table. And I did go to the other side of the table, behind the table, but luckily it was so creative. I loved it, because there's acting involved, a lot of directing involved, because the process is long. To get a Broadway show, you probably have at least 6 auditions, getting to the end, sometimes more, sometimes less. But the casting director is going to select every person that comes into the room. So I didn't know that. I didn't know. I think a lot of actors think that agents pick up the phone and say, "Here are my clients, like see my clients," and
Yeah.
it does not work that. you know, when there are breakdowns put out for a show. So, say I'm casting a production of Our Town, and I put out the breakdown for Emily and George and the Webbs and the Gibbs, and I describe all of those characters. Agents and managers are going to submit all of the clients that they have who they think are right for all of those roles. And it's all electronic now. So you can click on George Gibbs, and there might be 700 submissions. And I'm
Wow.
going to click through all of those. And through those 700 submissions, I might click 100 that I think might be interesting, to think about. And then I might, if I don't know some of those, like 25 of those or something, I'm going to just do a screening, and it's just going to be for me. And then I might know that I'm going to set up a few more. So I don't know, we might end up seeing 50 of those, or
Okay.
25 of those might end up seeing the director. And that's going to be through the screening process of the casting director, through my knowledge of who those actors are,
I see.
because I know their body of work, or I know their other auditions. And then I'm going to then have auditions and see who seems right or strong enough to go forward to the director.
Hmm.
And then there are many steps there with the director, and then the producers, and then final auditions. So at the very end, the casting director does not normally have the final say. It is a group effort. It
Okay.
is between the director, the casting director. It could be a lot of producers. If it's a musical, the music director, the choreographer, the associates. There could be, I mean, it's like many times before I'm bringing in actors, I go out in the hall and I'm bringing the actor in to come in and audition for their final callback. I'll say, take a breath, prepare yourself. It looks like a small town in there, because it can be like
Wow.
literally 19 people, that two or three rows of chairs behind tables. Like it can look like a small audience, and if they're not prepared for that, it can throw people off.
So no
But
pressure. There's a small town in here.
yeah, no pressure, do your thing, let it be intimate, just lock eyes with me, or look, whatever you need. But just
Yeah.
know there are a lot of people, they're all there in support of you, because so much of casting is, we want the best out of people. And to get the best out of people, you have to have people as comfortable as they can be.
Mhm.
Nerves are going to take over often. So it's our job to try to knock those nerves away. Used to, now it's, I don't know, it's going to be a whole new world now, but it used to be like when you greet people outside, give them a hug, or a pat on the shoulder, or just lock eyes and let them know that you're with them.
Gotcha.
And that's so much of what casting is about.
Wow. Wow. No idea. Had no idea. That's great. So okay. So you take them into the room. The casting direct as a casting director, your director
Mhm.
sees them. The producer sees them. You know, are you? How long does that process take from the moment you have gotten that 700 to the casted person?
It's, it can sometimes be a year out.
Oh wow.
It's not, sometimes it's not that far, but if it's a big Broadway show, it's going to be around a year. I mean, chances are they're going to be different. There's going to be like a workshop if it's a new show. And so it could be more than a year, because there are going to be different stages to it. But if it was just a show that we knew was going straight to Broadway, um, it, a good, yeah, like a year, because I mean, when they're building costumes and stuff, that stuff can take 6 months, to get the costumes built, and then rehearsals are so long. So I would say close to a year out
Okay.
before
Wow.
for things to happen, and then it can take several months. Yeah.
And as a casting director, do you focus in on a particular show, a particular character, or like multiple shows at a time?
But a show or multiple shows at a time,
Okay.
other than characters, yeah. And I think an interesting part of casting a Broadway show is that you don't do it once. It's very different than casting a movie, or even plays.
Yeah.
Um, for for theaters that aren't like commercial houses. Like a good friend of mine is casting director of the Public Theater in New York, and they're doing he's casting his Shakespeare shows in the park, one cast, maybe some understudies, and that's how he's casting everything, through the year at the Public Theater. And when they did Hair, and Hair then transferred to Broadway, I met him. We actually lived in the same building, and I met him one evening coming home, and he was like, oh my God. He was like, I don't know how you do, because it's not like you're casting one of everything. You
Mhm.
have to cast at least three,
Wow.
because you've got to have that understudies, and then you've got to really cast like five Mary Poppins at a time, and five Berts, and
Yeah.
five Ariels, and five Frankie Valleys, because you've got to have some in the hopper, waiting to be ready for replacements. And
Mhm.
so, one of the shows I worked on for many years, I worked on Mamma Mia for over 10 years, but I worked on Phantom of the Opera for the last, I'd say 6 or 7 years I was in casting. And people would always say, what are you working on? What's new? And you could tell they wanted me to say something for them to get excited about that's brand new. But for
Yeah.
me, it would be, I would say Phantom, and you see their eyes kind of get dull, like that's boring. But to me, looking for the next Phantom of the Opera or Christine or Rao was just as difficult, sometimes more so, than looking for the brand new,
Mhm.
shows, because the replacements, Hal Prince, until he died, he was at that theater every time there was a new Phantom or new Christine that had to go. He was a part of those auditions. And so,
Really?
yeah, yeah. And Cameron McIntosh and
Mhm.
Andrew Lloyd Webber, when they were in town, they'd fly in, and they would be a part of those auditions as well. So there's just as much importance put on those
Mhm.
shows. It doesn't get easier. It's
Yeah.
not like, oh, just who you got. It really doesn't get easier. And so that's something that's very different on casting a Broadway musical as opposed to casting a film where you do it once.
Wow. Okay. Well, and has there been a particular show, be it casting or any other show you've worked on, that you're really proud of, or you look back and say that's the one I really loved?
Well, I don't know that there's like just one,
Mhm.
but there are two that really do stand out. I mean, I just mentioned Mamma Mia, and people can roll their eyes at Mamma Mia, and I will not argue. I get that it can be like, ugh, fluff or whatever, but it is a show that I loved working on, and it allowed me to cut my teeth on being creative. And when we did recasting every year, it wasn't cookie cutter. Like if you look at Wicked, all the Glendas and all the Elphabas are pretty much of the mold of the original gals. Like they all have Kristen's voice, and it's kind of cookie cutter.
Yeah.
But with Mamma Mia, we were encouraged think outside the box. So different races, different sizes, different looks. We really, and so I learned as a casting director that it's possible to always think what if, what if, what if. And Mamma Mia gave me that ability. I'm also really proud of Billy Elliot for some of the same reasons, but working on Billy Elliot was difficult to find that level of dancer, not just in the role of Billy, because there
Mhm.
was another casting director that worked for the casting the kids, but to get people to really look like they were not chorus boys and girls,
Mhm.
and really different shapes, and really they looked like they worked in the mines, in England, and but yet they were amazing tap dancers. That was really fun to work on and stands out in my mind.
Awesome. Well, okay. So you left New York, came back, like you said, for homecoming. Um,
Hmm.
so now you are the producing artistic director at North Carolina Theater, and
Hmm.
before you said you were in a show back in high school. What show was that with at NCT?
Well, I did a couple of them. The first one that I did was Jesus Christ Superstar.
Mhm.
And so it was a great honor to be able to actually direct that at North Carolina Theater a few years ago. It was before I got this position,
Mhm.
before I knew that that was a possibility. But because I used to take breaks from my casting career, in the last few years of casting, I'd take a break. My boss, Tara Rubin, would allow me to pause and take
Oh,
a few weeks off to go direct around the country. And so I would come here and do things. So I was able to do Jesus Christ Superstar here, which really felt full circle. So that was, I was in that, and it was amazing because I was this high school kid. I would leave my, you know, high school. I would drive from there to come to rehearsal late afternoon, and I was on stage with these Broadway actors, and I was it was such incredible experience. And then cut 2 years later, like a lot of them we're in each other's lives now. And then it was really weird when I was like casting and I would bring them in for things. And, you know, I first knew them when I was in high school and on stage with them here in Raleigh. Um, so that was really cool. And then I was in this show, George M. That was about George M. Cohan. And I was in that as well.
So now that you're there, can you take us through what is a typical day for you? Now, I mean, granted, we are not very typical right now, but when you
Right.
first started out, what's a typical day for a producing artistic director?
Well, you know, if there's sort of two short answer. Well, I don't know how short they are, but there's two answers. Um, but because whether we're in production or not in production, but with doing 6 shows a season now and doing many shows with the conservatory, we're pretty much. It felt like we were in production almost all the time. I separate that because when we're in production, you know, we rehearse our shows from 2 until 10 at night, and so it makes for really, you know, it can make for late nights. And so when that happens, I wouldn't always be in as early, but usually I would be in by 9 o'clock in the mornings. And so if I was up really late, I might be in a little bit later than that. But um, so there's office hours, you know, downtown. We have our office space, and it's always working on the shows, you know, way in advance, sometimes the next season, and lining things up. And so there's a lot of office work and planning work and meetings. Um, and then when I'm directing shows, I'm actually out at rehearsal, you know, in those rehearsals. And when I'm not the director, but I'm the artistic director, I still make myself available to be out at rehearsal. um, Maybe not every single day. I don't want the director to feel like I'm just sitting there like breathing down their neck or, you know, micromanaging by any means, but I want to be there to be available and also to keep an eye on what's going, because it is my responsibility to sign off on all things artistic and production wise, and so to be there to put out any fires or to you know, help in any way that I can. So there's a lot of hours involved, and really, it's most days.
Dara Page from Facebook, Eric, doesn't have a question for you, but she loves your tree in the background. So just
Thank
want to
you.
make sure you
Thanks,
know
Dara.
that. So now that we are, you know, in a very different world right now, what are you guys up to at NCT?
Well, um, it's interesting because, of course, we're working from home, and we have been since March. Um, but the days have been really full. I mean, there've been I've stayed very busy, and I mean, I know you can relate. It feels like, you know, it's a lot of Zoom meetings, it's a lot of planning. You know, unfortunately, we've done a lot of planning that turns into more planning and more planning. We have shifted our season 3 times,
Mm.
you know, with big announcements and all of that. And what that means is, you know, moving all of those. I call it like moving an aircraft, like moving this whole huge thing, like the rights and all the people that are working on it, the designers, and you know, um, that takes a lot of time. And so we've moved, and now we've just been trying to be a little flexible with when we can get back and really start again. And we're hoping, obviously we're so excited
Mhm.
with the news of the vaccines, and it looks like there's a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. But that's where we are with this season. In the meantime, we've turned to virtual programming. I started this series called Stargazing early on, which was a fundraising effort. And it was like, could take some clips of some old shows and performances that we had done through the years in NCT. And then some of those performers taped themselves, you know, asking folks if they could, if they were able to give donations and to really help the theater out at the time. And so I did several episodes of that, 5, I believe. And then I created this series called Backstage at NCT. It hit me that we could take our rehearsal studio, which is really a big, huge black box, a studio, and turn it into a TV studio. And so I built had a set built that looks like Backstage. If you're familiar with Act Two of Noises Off, it's kind of like that. It's the idea of what it looks like if you're waiting in the wings. And so I wanted to have something that would look kind of pretty and theatrical to look at. And so I started doing a series of interviews with folks who you don't normally get to see, who the audiences don't normally get to see. And so far we have interviewed stage manager, lighting designer, costume designer, hair wig designer, makeup designer, and so we air those episodes. And then in addition to that, we also, oh yeah, there's an example of it. And in addition to that, we always have a special guest, a featured vocalist, so that there's an entertainment aspect to it as well. Um, I've been in the most recent episodes, I've been adding in a student performer because of our conservatory and so many incredibly talented students there. And so offering some opportunities there. And we've been doing another series as well called All In Community Conversations, where our president CEO Elizabeth Doran has been taking the themes of the shows that we didn't get to produce and has been bringing in community leaders and talking about the themes of those shows. And she's been incorporating student co-hosts from our conservatory to lead those conversations, and they have been really incredible. They're on par with like talkbacks after performances. And so we've been doing that. You know what, nothing can replace live theater, but it's at least a way to have a little bit of a performance and an entertainment element combined with some things that hopefully keep people interested and keep theater alive in some way.
All right. So we talked about backstage at NCT. We talked about
Mhm.
a couple of things. Do tell us, before COVID, what was it like, or how did you and NCT decide on shows? Like, how did you program the seasons?
Well, a lot of thought goes into it, and a lot of thought has always gone into picking seasons at North Carolina Theater. The interesting thing about North Carolina Theater is a lot of people in the area here, and no fault of anyone's, but they don't really know who the theater is or what the theater is. And because a lot of that confusion came within the last 10 years, because North Carolina Theater would produce some of the shows on the season, and then they would present some of the shows on the season. So in the season, some of the shows were actual tours that were rolling in and rolling out. And the audiences wouldn't know the difference when they bought a season ticket. And why should they?
Mhm.
The problem there is there's not control of what the product is. Some of those tours might be really great and some of those tours might not be good. And there's no quality control. And so when Elizabeth and I came in, and we have really been dedicated to increasing the identity of what North Carolina Theater stands for and hopes to do. And it's different than what Deepak does. Deepak brings in tours, great tours, first run Broadway tours. We're not doing that, nor do we want to do that. We want to take shows that are probably popular, some you might have seen before, and maybe do them in a new way. Um, Maybe do them in the way they've been done before, but we put it together here in North Carolina. We put it together here in Raleigh. We're bringing Broadway performers down and mixing them with North Carolina artists, performers, as well as people working behind the scenes. Each production, we hire in the area of 100 North Carolina artists, working orchestra, crew, front of house, back of house, and on stage. And the tours, of course, don't do that.
Mhm.
They're completely different objectives, but that's not been completely clear. So I've been working very, very diligently to increase that knowledge. And one of the ways to do it is to change the feel of a season. Um, the first season that I got here is the first time that a season has had a continuity, an overall theme,
Mhm.
and that was fine. That's not the way they did it before. But my first season was about inclusion, acceptance, and so you have shows like West Side Story and Kinky Boots and Memphis, and all of those shows are about two groups of people who are
Yeah.
not coming together, and then they find a way to have acceptance, or at least there's the brink of it. In West
Mhm.
Side Story, they don't get there really, but we're left with possibly hope that they are going to there's a better understanding. So that was really important to me, and then also the acceptance of having our say, which was a small show, about two women, the Delaney sisters, that are from right here in Raleigh, and you know the history that they saw and were a part of, and that kind of acceptance. And so a lot of thought went into, you and I have talked about this before, with thinking about what makes for a good season. And I certainly want to think about representing different ethnic groups. I want to think about creating possibilities for different ethnicities. I want to think about how many comedies there are in a season, what's dramatic material, how much dancing is there. We're in the South, so it's nice if there is sort of a country element, at least to one of
Mhm.
the shows. And then, title recognition has been a very big thing with North Carolina theater. I'd love one day to get to the place where that didn't matter, that people were just buying tickets to NCT just because they trust that it's going to be a great show. And even if we've never heard of it before, we want to come.
Mhm.
We're not there yet. And so it's important that we have titles where people really can, where people can get excited and want to come to those. But, you know, I'm long winded about that answer because so much does go into picking a good season. And then this season that we have coming up is Sing Out and Celebrate. And so we've picked, On Your Feet and 9 to 5 and
Mhm.
Sister Act and, Ring of Fire, which is about Johnny Cash, and Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill, which is about Billie Holiday. And so a lot of recognizable titles,
Mhm.
but at the same time, they're all about people who found their voice, and there's a lot of celebration in there.
That's
So
yeah.
people don't have to understand the theme, but I like it if you can look back and say, oh, I kind of get that, or I see how that goes together, or I see what you were wanting to say with that.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, like, a show should carry a message, and the season itself should also carry a message. And I think that's great. Sonia, just no question here, but she says, "I'm sitting here grinning because I'm so proud of you and so happy you are at NCT. Looks like she was with you with Birdie and Arsenic and Grease at I guess South Johnson High School.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's Sonia. Yes, absolutely. It's so
Yes.
good to hear from you. Yes,
Small
that's
world. This
great.
place.
It is a small world. Yeah, South Johnson High.
Yeah,
That's
there it is,
great.
Benson. All right, so I do want to ask a little bit about NCT Conservatory. You consider yourself an educator. Can you talk to us about what is NCT Conservatory and what does it do?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, I have had different experience with teaching through the years, and I did a lot of teaching actually when I was a casting director, and I ended up doing classes all around the country at a lot of the different training programs for musical theater, and it actually took me to around the globe, and I've been a guest in Australia teaching musical theater classes. So teaching has been a big part of my life as well, that a part of it that I love. And so that happened to line up really nicely with the conservatory that is here at North Carolina Theater. It was created about 25 years ago now. It started as a summer theater arts program by Deanne Jones, the founder of the theater, and it morphed into a year-round program. And Ray Walker was a huge part of developing this program, and it became one of the top training programs in the area for young people who were interested in musical theater, singing, acting, and dancing. And we have continued that. We've gone through a lot of changes in the last few years, and we've changed the focus a bit to be a bit more concentrated in the classes, Not that there's not a performance element, there certainly is,
Yeah.
but we really want to make it about the training part of it. And so I have been a big part of bridging that world with the professional world and with Broadway. And I've been a part of bringing in a lot of top Broadway performers and some recognizable folks to lead master classes.
Mhm.
Even in this pandemic, I've been able to bring folks in to do virtual master classes, which has been great. As far as the hands-on teaching, I have done some, but we have rounded up an incredible staff led by our executive director, Lauren Sale, who brings in incredible teaching artists here that have been working very hands-on with giving top-notch training there in singing, acting, and dancing. On the flip side, we don't just do that. We also have a lot of classes for young students who may not be interested in pursuing theater at all, but just thought that might be kind of fun to try,
Mhm.
or have always been curious about getting a little bit better at dancing or a little bit better at singing. There are tons of classes there. So we're really dedicated to those two prongs of really furthering this pre-professional training and getting students ready to audition for top schools if that's the route they want to go, or also just getting experience if they are interested in seeing what it's like, and want to have fun and really enjoy all that theater has to offer without the professional side.
That's great. Yeah, no, and I've been a part of the NCT Conservatory for a while, and it was a great program, and it sounds amazing now with the direction you guys are going. I look forward to when my daughter and son get a little older to come on out.
We can't wait.
Um, so we all seen that the vaccine is now around and now going out to the country. Where do you see the future of theater arts? Going forward.
Gosh, it changes. It feels like it changes. It's not that it changes daily. The time period feels like it keeps changing with the information that we're getting. When you hear that we might be back to normal, in the fall of next year, and even what is normal, and then you hear, like, I don't know. I think from what I'm hearing, I think masks are certainly going to be around for a good while, and even when the vaccine is fully around and there's mass vaccination, I think when people are sick, I think that masks are going to be a part of our culture, just like they are in some of the Asian cultures. And I think that that's going to be there as far as in the audience.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's going to take a while to build back. And that's one of the reasons that as a producing artistic director, I have to think about that, because I have to think about our budgets, because our budgets have to match what we might be able to bring in audience wise,
Yeah.
because we can't overspend if we don't think that we're going to make it back in ticket sales. So I'm trying to do that and make sure that the product is just as great, and that it doesn't. But how can you make it a little bit smaller but still be just as good? That's what we're all asking ourselves. And so I do think that some elements will be trimmed back, but hopefully those elements won't be noticeable to audiences. I think audiences will be in masks for a while. I think people backstage will be in masks. I do not think once we have the vaccines that
Yeah.
masks will be on stage, but I think it's changing. We are a union. We hire actors that are in the actors union, and so there's a whole different set of rules and restrictions that we have to follow before we can hire our stage managers and our performers. Um, and that's something that we're dealing with now too, because some community theaters and are able to start doing some things that we're still not able to do. And you know I don't begrudge anybody who's able to do things, but if anything, I'm just a little envious. But at the same time, we're just following the
Yeah.
protocol,
Of
that
course.
that we have to follow. um I don't know. I keep trying to temper expectations a bit with our board and with patrons, and just saying, I mean, like, Whenever we are in 22, when we're able to do Sister Act, I hope that we can do the big lavish production that we're hoping, with the huge sets and really sparkly, incredible costumes and all of that. I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't I don't know. I don't know if things are just going to have to be pared down for a while. I don't know what the new normal is.
yeah.
Um, so we'll just see.
Yeah, I keep hearing, and I think I've said this 100 times on this show. Um, I've heard this. Somebody said it. We're not going back to normal. We're going forward to a new normal. I
That's
like
right.
that idea. All right. So, NC State at
Hmm.
university is a STEM campus with a artistic heart, is the way we kind of see it. And
Yeah.
at your time, in school, were there any classes that you took that were not primarily artistic in nature that you feel really prepared you for your role today?
The answer is no, but let me qualify that.
Okay.
Because I went to a conservatory and I didn't take other things. So I had placed out. I did have to take an AP. I took one English course and I had to take one computer course. I really didn't have. I say have to do that because that's where my mind was. I was like, whew. And so I totally, I knew what I wanted to do, and that conservatory environment was right for me and not right for a lot of people. I don't. I think it's incredible for some folks. It's not the route for a lot of folks. So that's the first part of the answer. The second part of the answer is there are tons of classes that um, I, if I had to go back, I would love to take. I mean, the fact that I had no business classes is a crying shame. Being in this, so to be an artistic director of a theater, really just to be in business, period, and to work in a theater that is a corporation. I mean, not it's nonprofit, but it's it's really important to take business classes, um, economic classes. Of course, anything like any sort of language arts and classes like that are incredible to take. But oddly, math. I wanted to flee from math. Oh my god! But I just the other day, my dad has passed, but my dad was a mathematician, and he taught math and big in computers and all that. But I was like trying to work through these percentages, putting together a budget and working through these percentages, and had the calculator out, and I got so confused, and I was like, Dad, I hear you laughing. It was like, because I used to say, like, I'm not gonna need this, I'm not gonna need this, and he was like, just you wait.
Yep.
Just wait. So there are lots of things. I mean, I had a great acting instructor at Carnegie Mellon, and he basically called all of us dumb actors. And he said, "You need to." He was like, "I want you to come back here next week, and I want you to tell me how many newspapers you read in the week, how many books, how many magazines, and I want you to all to have at least gone to 2 museums."
Hmm.
And so what he was saying is, you can't be a good performer, you can't be a good artist if you're not living, if you're not learning
Yeah.
other things all of the time. And so there are so many classes that are important to take.
And do you feel were there any lessons as a performer that helps you in your role as a producing artistic director?
Yes. Lots of things, but I would say first and foremost, discipline.
Hmm.
What One of the best things that the conservatory taught me, and I didn't go through dance. It's not like I trained at a ballet company, which is so strict, but it wasn't that far behind, and it was in the late 80s, early 90s, and so I think it's still very strict. But I mean, it was strict. It was, when classes started, if a class started at 8 a.m., the door was shut at 8 a.m. and locked at 8 a.m. And if you were late if you were on time. And so learning that, like, be early. You have to be early. Early is on time. And so just so many elements of discipline that have been helpful. Really, I'm sure they would be helpful in any walk of life. But in being in a position of leadership, it's important to have that kind of discipline,
Gotcha.
work
Awesome.
ethic.
Yeah. So hey, I got some fun questions for you.
Okay.
If you were able to do any show, you whether it be directed or act in it or produce it, what show would you most like to do or always wanted to do?
Oh gosh.
Or have you done them all?
Well, I've done a lot of them, and it's funny. It's interesting. Well, I just, as an example, when I was saying the thing about a casting breakdown, I used Our Town. I did
Mhm.
direct a production of Our Town, actually in North Carolina, actually at Theater in the Park years and years ago, many, many years ago. But I love that place so much. Um, I would love to do that. I would love to direct the play Tribes, but I don't. I do not know sign language, and so I would either need to know that, or I would need to work with someone that did. And musical wise, on my wish list, I have two. One is a little night music, and the other one is The Color Purple. But I would not direct The Color Purple. I would want a person of color. I would want an African American director on that. Um, but I
Yeah.
would love to produce it and have
Be a part of that
someone direct that. Be a
experience.
part of
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah. And your bio shows, and you mentioned it actually earlier on, that you've worked with Stephen Sondheim and Cameron McIntosh, Stephen Schwartz. Do you still were you starstruck then? Do you still get starstruck when you meet these names that we read on the front of a book?
Yeah. I mean, starstruck. I do. I think I do get starstruck because I just get excited. I mean, things like that never get old. They just don't get old. And I mentioned Hal Prince earlier, but whenever we would do auditions for Hal Prince, we would do them in the actual Majestic Theater where Phantom plays, and that's not normal. Normally, auditions are done in audition studios,
Yeah.
yeah, for the money because it's
Yeah.
just too expensive. But when Hal Prince wants to do it, um, they make it work. And the same is true for certain other directors. But yeah, I think it's less starstruck. But when I would meet them and I was casting, I was so nervous. It would be hard to sleep the night before. I would just be nervous because, Cameron McIntosh is a genius, and he would scare the heck out of me. Not that he meant to, but just, and then when you do a good job, you feel even more satisfied. But yeah, I would get starstruck. I cast the last revival, or the only revival, but the revival of Sunset Boulevard. And one of the things that you get to do when you're casting director, you are often invited to the first day of rehearsal for the meet and greet. And so I had done the auditions, and for the meet and greet, I got situated standing in the big giant circle right next to Glenn Close. And so, because she was reprising her role, and so, it doesn't get old. You're like, oh my God, I'm right here. And I hope you like the people that we cast to work with you.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's really fun.
Yay. So we have an anonymous attendee asking a question. Thank you, anonymous.
Hi, Anonymous.
Let's see. Are there things or traditions COVID has provided you a way to get rid of that may have been a relic of NCT's past? What new things discovered during COVID will you take into NCT's future?
That's a great question.
Yeah, it is.
Um, well, I guess I hit a little bit on being able to have everyone on board with being a little bit more creative in maybe some production values, in doing things in different ways, and letting everybody be on board. I feel like I was trying to push that along anyway with certain things, but not that people were against it, but I think people can't picture what you're talking about until they see it, and so now, knowing that we have to hit the reset button in a lot of ways, I think a lot of folks will be supportive of maybe approaching things differently.
Mm.
But the most important aspect is along with COVID during this time with the Black Lives Matter movement, and we see you with BIPOC performers and artists off stage as well as on stage. That's just something that I have been dedicated to for such a long time, and was, I would say, the most important part of casting for me. Um, and so this was not brand new, and this didn't just start for me. But now everybody is awake,
Mm.
and it at least beginning to wake up. And so I think this is going to that's going to be something that can feel different. I'm proud of the fact that in the last season, when we went back, and we were 51% BIPOC with the number of artists on the stage. And I don't say that in a braggy way, but I'm proud that we're at least there and we can go further. But I'm really dedicated to the people behind the stage, providing more opportunities for BIPOC artists. And so that's something that
That's great.
we have the opportunity to do.
Awesome. Thank you, Anonymous. So we're coming towards the end of the night, and I know that because you have had quite a few different, again, hats that you've worn, I want to make sure we have time to hit some of those with this final question that we ask all of our guests. If you could give one piece of advice to a young person wanting to become a casting director or a producing artistic director, what would that be? And you can answer those separately if you like.
Well, an answer that applies to both of them is go to see as much theater as possible. Go to see everything. I mean, because it just builds up knowledge, and see things even if they're recorded, if they're theatrical productions. And because that's like an education in itself. One of the things that I would say specifically, if a person is interested in casting, I used to do this. Well, soap operas were my first job was actually on a soap opera, which is just funny, but
Wait.
it
But which
was.
one? Let's not glance
Well,
over that.
it's been gone for a long time,
Okay.
but
All right.
it was called Loving. And
Okay.
so I was on that, but what's interesting about that is I really have been interested in soap operas. Like, even when I was in theater school, and people might be like, oh, soap operas, but I was like, no, there's some really good acting on there, and I studied them. So there used to be Soap Opera Digest. I don't know if it's around anymore, but I would study it. I would study the casts. Even if I didn't watch the show, I loved like studying who the casts were. So I used to do that long before I was involved in casting. And I would want to, and sometimes if you're interested in casting, make up your own fancy cast list of a movie that you love, of a TV show, and think about casting different people in it. Think outside the box. Think about different ethnicities. Switch a man role for a female role. Like that, those are great exercises to do if you're interested in casting. As far as producing, I would still go to as much theater as possible, and I would study all elements. Pay attention to the lights, pay attention to the sound design, pay attention to the orchestra, study the names in the playbill, go early, leave late, like wander down, look up, take it all in. And those are some ways to start to begin the process of all elements of a production.
Awesome. Well, Eric, I think I'm at the end of my questions for tonight, and I want to thank you for taking the time out to speak to us, let us know what a casting director is and what it is you do at North Carolina Theater. Thank you very much for joining us.
Gosh, it's been my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, and thank you all for joining.
And happy holidays.
Happy holidays.